Okay, welcome to this episode of The Unnoticed Show. Today, I'm joined by Matthew Stormoen, who's joining us all the way from Santa Monica. Matt, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, Matt, you have a company called Mobibi. Tell us how you help entrepreneurs to get noticed.
Yeah, so what we do with Mobibi is we've created kind of a crowdsourcing type content system or platform. And what I mean by that is we use technology to empower your employees to create content, to share important company news, and more importantly, to be engaged in the mission of your business.
And how do you do that? When you say sort of one of the challenges for many companies is that they talk about a vision to the team, they embed that with the team, but they have a marketing manager or two people maybe who are in charge of kind of being custodians of that online, and
Yes.
they're kind of swamped. How are you helping the company then to kind of like help the whole company become an army, become a whole sort of marketing team?
Yeah. So uh, little backstory, I spent 15 years running a digital agency. So I have a lot of experience working with the marketing operations within companies. And one of the biggest things that I noticed is when creating content, whether that be blog, video, or social, when you relegate that to one person or a small team, your content tends to take on a limited point of view. And if you look at brands and startups, entrepreneurs on social, they're very good at one thing or a kind of a small niche. And what happens is after 6 months or 12 months, the same message comes out over and over and over again. And that's why you see engagements decline. That's why you see your follower growth stall, because one person has limited perspective. So the idea with Mobibi is we want to collect content from the entire organization and different points of view, diversity of voice. And what that does when you start publishing that is not only does it engage your audience with new ideas and concepts, but it also gets your entire staff thinking, how do I grow this business? So now instead of having three people thinking about that, you've got 25 or 50 people thinking that.
So, Matt, that really is the multiplier act, isn't it? And you really get an amplification army, which is fantastic. But that's not without some challenges. So, let's just talk first of all about control, because most companies, especially bigger ones that maybe have shareholders, terrified about what gets said that might not be compliant in some way. Can you just tell us how does Mobibi solve one of those problems, which is having lots of people writing possibly on behalf of the company, but without any censure?
Yeah, that's a common concern which we generally address right away. And what I mean by that is we have user roles and permissions. Employees who join this program on behalf of your company, we call them contributors. So what they're doing is they're contributing content to be approved, rejected, or reviewed. So nothing from a contributor can be published without a manager hitting the approve button. But I also want to I want to speak on that point a little bit differently too, because I think a lot of companies make a pretty big mistake thinking they have to stay right in this brand lane and they can't deviate from the message or the concept, the design. You have it. And what I would challenge companies to say is, other than delving into political or issues that are not to be touched, but who's to say the brand is right? Isn't it your audience, your target market? What happens is, and you know this from being in PR, you get a brand manager that comes in and says, this is our brand, this is what we're going to be. But yet you have hundreds of thousands of customers and you're dictating to them. Why not flip it and send a bunch of different messages and then see what resonates with the customers?
Okay, so that's interesting. So you have basically, in a way, sort of crowdsource, although your own crowd, generating content and under some degree of control. Does that then create a large bottleneck, though, for whoever it is that then has to approve? Or is there some kind of AI filter of the kind that you have on the big platforms, which is kind of weeding out, looking for things that might cause a problem?
Well, it's a great question. And I have to say, I don't think AI is to a point where it can actually understand the subtleties of the content. So in our platform, we do use some of the AI text analysis from Amazon called Comprehend. So we are scanning it, looking for flags, looking for certain words. But you also understand that your employees in general should, and especially in a startup, should all be going towards the company and really promoting it in a way because their employment's at stake. This isn't giving your audience the ability to create content. This is your employees.
Yeah, there's a great point that actually, if you are worried about what they're going to be saying, you probably made the wrong decision in terms of hiring or engagement in the first place, right? And so, how does that work from a practical point of view? Do people, for example, all have a Twitter handle, which is company name at personal name, for example, or are they connecting those to multiple channels using something like Buffer or Zoho? From a practical point of view, how would you set up Mobibi?
So the starting point for Mobibi is to use the brand channels. So what I'll give you kind of an idea here. So we have a mobile app. And if you can think back to the olden days client server relationships, right?
Mhm.
You have your server and you have all these nodes
Yes,
connected.
that's right. Yeah.
So think of this. Think of you have 50 employees and you sign up for the Mobibi platform and every employee goes and downloads our app. Now they have a content creation tool in their hand on their mobile phone. All they do, if they see an article, if they have a thought or an idea, they open up the app, they type in what they would like, where they're going to send it, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then they submit it. That's their contribution. Now, the manager comes in and imagine being a content manager, waking up in the morning and looking in the platform and seeing 25 ideas.
Oh, mate, I can only tell you, most people would be like, thank God I don't have to think of 25 ideas, right? I mean, it'd be the best
Yeah.
editorial job imaginable.
Yeah. Look, let's say you're just publishing once per day. That's 365 tweets a year. Maybe you want to be different than the standard, Monday blues, all the standard stuff. That is a lot of creativity to put on one person.
And what I like about where you're going with Mobibi, Matt, is that companies are resorting to AI to create content. And there's a danger that's becoming more kind of anodyne, really. There isn't really much personality to it because it's created by AI that's not invested in your business. But you're exploring a whole new source of contribution from people that are going to have different perspectives about the business, but are all related to the business.
Yep. Well, there's kind of a frame I use when I explain this, and I'll talk about like I like cars. I'm an automotive enthusiast. One of the brands I like is Audi, and they have this thing. It's called a rear sports differential. It's going a little deep, but instead of Audi tweeting out like summer of Audi event or save on your next car, I would like to hear from someone in the engineering team about some advancement they made automotively. And now if you take our platform and you empower people in different units within the business, you're getting different perspectives, different content.
Matt, that's absolutely true. And what it does for the audience, be it customers, partners, and also other members of staff, of course, is it creates a 360-degree view of the business as
Yeah.
well, doesn't it? Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've covered off sort of the source. What is it that's going to motivate someone who says, that's not my job, I'm in production or I'm in finance, to want to get involved in creating content?
Yeah. It's a great question, and one that or I should say, we immediately were thinking about when we started building this platform. And, if I can think back in my career, there was one company, I remember it incredibly well. They had a loyalty program based on performance, and you got a magazine with products. You could only get it from this magazine, and you'd use your points and get a gift or whatever. But I remember 15, 20 years later, I still remember that thing about that organization. And so what we've built into the platform is a point system called like gamification. We have leaderboards. So there's two things you get with this. One, you get the kind of the desire to compete with your employees. You get that natural camaraderie. Hey, I just passed you on the leaderboard, or I've got this great idea. I'm gonna overtake you. And then the second thing is, and we encourage all organizations, is to do, small little gifts, whether it be a Starbucks card or, some type of little gift for the winner of the month, the winner of the quarter. From an organizational standpoint, you're not just getting this great content to drive your demand generation. You're actually getting your employees engaged and excited about doing this. And that's the power of the platform is not just the sales and the revenue, getting your employees engaged and think about your mission.
Okay, so that's fantastic. And I think that you get everyone to participate, which of course is what every annual company event encourages everyone to do, right? And says, come on, you play a part, and then they go away and they have no part to play from a communications perspective, at least. But what about for the customer or for the audience and for let's say the media? If they're seeing this stream of content coming from Mobibi, it's still coming from the company's corporate website, isn't it? Or corporate social channels. Is that right, Matt?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, a caveat on that is the reason we call our users contributors is because on the flip side of them creating content to publish on the brand channel, they can, if they're active in social, they can add their personal social media, and then the brand can send out content that they can publish. So a use case would be like recruiting, right? Which is incredibly difficult right now. What you can do if you're an HR department is you can create a separate campaign and say, look, anyone who brings in a new recruit gets $500. And here's our recruiting message. So I would add my LinkedIn account, my personal one. The brand would send me the recruiting collateral, and I would publish it on my personal LinkedIn account. And you can do this at scale because you could have 100 people there.
Yeah.
And now you're not promoting from a brand point, you're promoting from a personal employee level. And then with our tracking and our link shortener variables, we track what employee published it, where it was published, and did the person who just signed up or put an application in, did they come from that post? So it's tracked full circle.
Well, that's very powerful because, of course, what we're finding is that, for example, on Twitter, corporate Twitter accounts are not being followed, but CEO accounts as an individual are being followed. And that same with LinkedIn, although you get a big corporate page, by and large, people are not paying attention to those. But within the community, the network that individual has, that's where the content is getting engagement. So that's a really wonderful way that you've made it parallel universe for sharing.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, people not following brand channels, because why would you? If it's the same content being published every brand, not to be a contrarian here, but brand social is 9 times out of 10 is terrible. Because again, it's just they're promoting their products. Like
it's really advertising across the different media. Actually, a lot of this social stuff is really what corporate has been told to advertise.
Yes.
As opposed to what the company maybe mission is or what the contextual relationship between the company and the partners. Because I'm also keen on talking not only to end customers, but to partners. Because for many businesses, the supply chain is, well, for all of us, is mission critical. From referrals, or if we've seen recently, companies whose supply chains get disrupted, all of a sudden it's chaos at the point of sale. So Matt, what about for the content about the quality of consistency? Because there's brand guidelines, which says, it must be logo on the left or the right, for example. There's also an element of some people have got a high quality phone camera, some have got a low one, some might be posting for infographics and some not. Now, you mentioned there's a sort of a contributor. Is there some way that you help people to harmonize and upgrade their skills? Because not everyone's going to be contributing to the same level threshold. And how do you overcome what could become sort of a few Uber contributors and a lot of other people losing interest?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. So when we're talking about a point structure in the gamification, we're talking about all of the interactions. So whether that be your approval rate. So if I submit 50 ideas and one gets approved, I have a terrible approval rate. And so that'll be apparent immediately if someone is not qualified to be doing this. The second thing on brand guidelines is, today is incredibly important. I think we've all become a little bit cynical of brands and their, you know, just their message that's so clearly crafted that you don't even understand who the brand is anymore because they all
Mhm.
sound the same. Breakout brands. I mean, you can look back at something like Dollar Shave Club. He did weird videos with bears and someone would say, well, wow, that's not brand appropriate. But guess what? They sold to $1 billion for Unilever in 5 years. Because what we have to do as marketers and as company leaders is we have to break out of this box that everybody's playing in. And look, if you want to grow your business and you want to capitalize on a market, some risk is required. And the higher up you go, the more understanding you get of that risk.
So, Matt, what about costs? How much does Mobibi cost, and what sort of size company would find this useful to deploy?
Where most SaaS companies today will charge a per user basis, which I had a terrible problem with because maybe I just wanted, my assistant to join and she cost the same as me. So the packages we've created range anywhere from $49 starting point all the way, north of 500, depending on how many contributors you want. But to give you an idea, comparable is you can have one manager and five contributors for under $100. So
Yeah.
think about this. Like, you're an entrepreneur, you have 10 people. Maybe you want three of these people to create content, but you have one marketing manager. So you can have the marketing manager and five people for under $100.
And
I
that
mean,
is such a time saver too, isn't it, Matt? Now, what about for you? Final question. How are you getting Mobibi noticed? Any tricks of the trade on getting noticed yourself?
yeah. So a lot of things. One is finding people and reaching out to them. Very manual process. Depending on the stage of growth you're in, unless you're VC backed, cost per acquisition has skyrocketed. It's very hard to be bootstrapped and profitable if you're paying for your leads. So leverage all the free tools and generate content upon content upon content. The this idea that you can only tweet once per day or you can only post once per day. Look, refresh your Twitter feed and see how many tweets come in. There's nothing wrong with, three tweets a day. And clients that have used Mobibi and enabled this contributor concept, they've ramped their publishing up 200% and it's paid off in spades.
Okay, because they're getting much more inbound marketing content, right?
Yes.
That's going out across
Yep.
the channels. Matt,
Yep.
that sounds fantastic. So if you want to find out more about Mobibi and about you, how can they do that?
So they can find us on the web, mobibi.com. That's mobibi.com. You can find us on Twitter. On our social channels, it's on Mobibi. And then you can find my personal Twitter where I diverge a little bit from just purely marketing and business talk. And that's at Matt Stormoen on Twitter.
Great. And of course, I'll include all of those in the show notes. Matt, thanks. I think you're solving a real problem. So I've been really excited to have you on the show because to get
Yeah.
the whole team to contribute to what the company's doing and to share that's going to release a whole bunch of enthusiasm and creativity from the organization. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are going to love that. So thank you so much for creating it and for sharing it.
Yeah. And thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely my pleasure. So you've been listening to Matt Sturman, who is over there in Santa Monica, where they've got, of course, the lovely boulevard and the beach and the whole Baywatch thing going on. You've been listening to me, Jim James, in a slightly less auspicious Somerset garden. Thank you so much for listening to The Unnoticed Show.